Hello and welcome to the LPL brief again. This is currently week 3, day 2 just ended. I have so far talked about Edward Gaming, LGD Gaming, and QG Reapers. So I'm going to talk today about Royal Never Give Up. So the first question I get from people who watch Royal Never Give Up is, who are these Chinese players? Because on a lot of these teams so far, we've seen QG, we've seen Edward Gaming, we've seen LGD, we know the players by now, but few people who were just casually watching the LPL last year would know the Chinese players on Royal Never Give Up because they were on teams that were constantly toward the bottom. Mlxg and Whoosh are from a team called King that did really well in 2014 summer League of Legends Secondary Pro League. This team had Sky, who's currently on ZTR Esports, Mlxg, who's currently the jungler for Royal Never Give Up. They had Sask, who's currently on the bench for Royal Never Give Up. He's their sub mid laner. They had Whoosh, or No Heart, who is currently starting for Royal Never Give Up, and then they had their support Lei, who is also currently playing in the reserve team with Sask for Royal Never Give Up. Now, this team looked really, really good in the offseason, start of LSPL, kind of like QG, kind of like Snake. They were doing really well in offseason tournaments leading up to the tournament, leading up to the LPL. They were beating LPL teams outside of the LPL, but they got into the LPL and they lost a lot of the things that made them look really, really strong. And this primarily was their proactive early game playmaking. In particular, Mlxg, who had been really, really aggressive in the past in the offseason and in the LSPL, was suddenly really lukewarm, and the team just tried to farm out and they got overwhelmed and pretty crushed in most games. This continued throughout most of the LPL until probably week 10 of LPL summer, which was when they sort of seemed to click and turn back on. I don't really attribute this to the return of Vical. Vical was the coach, the Korean coach of Starhorn Royal Club when they went to the World Championship in 2014. He returned to the team at that point. King, that team, they had a coach called, well, he was a StarCraft 2 manager, and he had sort of a bad reputation, but he was later replaced by some of the Samsung coaching staff, and the team sort of limped and wilted at that point. They changed up their roster a little bit for summer and became Royal Never Give Up, and that's when Vical returned to the roster in week 10. Mlxg kind of seemed to click on, and he was really, really aggressive again. Now, Xiaohu joined the team at the start of summer. He joined Royal Never Give Up when they became Royal Never Give Up, and the Starhorn Royal Club roster went to Team King after being relegated. Xiaohu, I think Sask and Xiaohu are actually very, very similar level. It's just that Xiaohu is a little bit more aggressive, and I think that they were kind of trying to get the energy back into the team in that regard. But Xiaohu and Mlxg have shown that they have pretty strong synergy together, so they work well. That's a good unit. Mlxg, I would say, in classifying and talking about his skill level, people have been looking at him right now and saying he looks really, really good. I'd say that his decision-making in the early game is just really, really standard. He tends to clear out the jungle, go get the Scuttle Crab, back, buy some items, go back, either look for a gank or continue clearing the jungle, depending on what side of the jungle he's on. If he's on red side, he ganks more often. Just little things about Mlxg that seem to be standing out. But overall, he's kind of okay. He's looked really, really strong on Graves, which is great. In the past, he's been a good Rek'Sai player. He's been a good Elise player. He's been a decent Nidalee player, though I'd say his skill shot usage isn't that great. He does well on these aggressive junglers. The problem is when he plays these aggressive junglers is that in the mid or late game, he'll just kind of go into 5 people and throw an entire lead. So he's very, very good at securing leads for his team, but in the offseason, when I talked about when King was doing really, really well in these third-party tournaments, standard issue would be the final would be Edward Gaming versus Team King. Team King would be up like 10 to 20,000 gold, and then suddenly Mlxg would jump into 5 Edward Gaming players around Baron, and Edward Gaming would win. So he's pretty consistent about this sort of behavior and this sort of awkward team fighting mentality. Xiaohu, as I said, he's really well known as Zero players. His debut game was for Gamti in spring, in the LPL, of course. He used to play for in the off season a little bit because teams don't necessarily have age restrictions. Other tournaments don't necessarily have age restrictions. But he joined when he turned 16, because the LPL age limit is 16. He joined Gamti, and one of his debut performances, he solo killed Dade, which at the time, people were still on the fence on whether or not it means anything. Turns out it really doesn't. But he's a strong Fizz player, he's a strong Azir player. He developed the ability to play Victor. He's played a lot of Jace. He's been a really, really good Zed. He's very young, kind of cocky, but he seems to be actually more modulated than Mlxg, so it works out alright. Wushin is really interesting. I think Wush suffers a little bit from Mlxg syndrome. He likes to hop forward, he likes to be really aggressive. I've described him as the past as UZI mentality of styling and soloing and jumping into people without necessarily UZI's upside. He's pretty talented. I would say he has some development, but I don't see him ever really becoming this elite type Chinese AD carry. He's pretty good. He's an above average Chinese AD carry, we'll say that. He synergizes really well with his old support Lei. I thought that as a package deal, that bottom lane was really, really solid. And I was pretty high on them as a duo because I think Lei's vision control at that time was really strong. So, obviously, Mata has a thing about wards. There is not going to be too bad. More or less the Chinese players on the team. Now, moving on to talk a little bit more about the Koreans, we have Looper and Mata, and there's a kind of conception that they were just really bad last year. Looper in particular, I actually think is not a good player. I think Looper was always known for his teleports, and ironically, top laners who have played with, or coincidentally I should say, top laners who have played with Mata have all been known for their teleport usage. Suddenly he's playing on Royal Never Give Up and his teleports look good again. He has control of the side of the map that he's playing on. I'd say he's matched up pretty equally to most of the big top laners that he's faced in this group. He's done pretty even against Koro, pretty even against Long. So I think that he's fine. He's not really a great top laner, but his synergy with Mata seems to be really high, and the way that they teleport and move and control the side lanes as a duo was really strong. Mata, I would say, last year he kind of tilted a little bit. He was very clearly unhappy with his team. His team probably didn't like him too much because of his attitude. He was fined for playing a J support game. I think as long as this team continues, but he still had these really great solo performances where he could just win the game for the team in 15 minutes. And sometimes his shot calling would deteriorate and he'd start over fixating on Baron throws and things like this. But I think Mata's the kind of person, as long as you're happy and winning, it's going to be a good thing. But as soon as you start to lose a few games or fall off a little bit, I think that's where we'll see Royal Never Give Up as a unit really tested. Now let's talk a little bit more about the point I brought up, which is that the Koreans control the side lanes. Like I said, if you have the teleport calls handled by the support and the top laner, and I think the synergy and the language issue with the support and the top laner is really, really important, that works really well to kind of create a border around the map. So either side, you have an understanding of the support knows what's going on here, the top laner knows what's going on here, we can create plays and we can bridge the map together that way. We can fold the map so that it meets if we need to. In terms of the Chinese players, they're going to be handling a lot of the team fighting, a lot of the skirmishing that's happening in the middle of the map, in pockets in the jungle, things of that nature. Mata will do his part to rush the Moby boots. He's still doing that, and ward all over the map. But the Chinese players take advantage of this, and they're the ones who are being the creative sort of style type players who are just working together in terms of team fights. Mata, of course, does a lot in team fights, but I think that this is kind of the core idea upon which Royal Never Give Up was built, which you have the Koreans bringing the map together and the Chinese players doing a lot of the damage, creating the carry potential in the middle. ultimately brings us to the question of some of the bench players. I already mentioned Sask. I think Sask and Letme are actually really, really strong, and they improved a lot over the course of the year. I kind of wonder what it would look like to have Sask and Letme play. I also wonder about Insect. A lot of people actually kind of expected Insect to play because of Mata. I did not. I was pretty sure it was going to be Looper and Mata. I don't think Insect has shown that great of a form as a jungler in the past year, so I did not expect him to play at all. Apparently, this roster, though, is doing really, really well in the Reserve League. They're winning most of their games, so that's really good for them, I hope. So maybe we can see kind of a second team develop, sort of the idea that I had with QG. In terms of Name, Name is the big name player. We've got Name and UZI, who are kind of the hotness, you know, in 2014. They're both benched on their teams right now. In the QG video, I really advocated for them to stay with this roster and not use UZI. I think that the same needs to be true in Royal. As long as they're still winning, as long as they're still looking strong, they should not play Name. I will say that Whoosh's last set against, I think it was against OMG, could have been, it was either Hyper Youth Gaming or OMG, but his last set where he played Tristana, he went pretty hard Wild Turtle. So I really want to hope that he can improve that. Maybe they should stop giving him Tristana. I know he has a bit of a Vayne fixation, and he'll pick Vayne in really weird situations. But I think they should focus on trying to keep him on a shorter leash with Mata and the shot calling, rather than put in Name. But if it gets really, really bad, we can revisit this conversation. Just like if Pekka on QG starts to lose lane more, we can revisit the UZI conversation as well. So these are always things looming in the back of the mind. It's like, Whoosh, you better straighten up or we'll put this guy in. Or my thing with Name is I really wonder if he cares anymore. That's kind of the depressing thing, is that I just feel like I haven't seen him care that much. He's doing the DNF thing. He was really considering retiring at the end of the year, but hey, they're doing well in the Reserve League. I'd like to see some of those VODs because I like the idea of a team with Letme, Insect, Sask, Name, and Lei. I think that could be a great team in and of itself, and maybe we'll see the full teams start to rotate the way a sort of positive QG should go for in the future if this Royal struggles a little bit. Know the players by now, but few people who were just casually watching the LPL last year would know the Chinese players on Royal Never Give Up because they were on teams that were constantly toward the bottom. Mlxg and Whoosh are from a team called King that did really well in 2014 summer League of Legends Secondary Pro League. This team had Sky, who's currently on ZTR Esports, Mlxg, who's currently the jungler for Royal Never Give Up. They had Sask, who's currently on the bench for Royal Never Give Up. He's their sub mid laner. They had Whoosh, or No Heart, who is currently starting for Royal Never Give Up. And then they had their support Lei, who is also currently playing in the reserve team with Sask for Royal Never Give Up. Now, this team looked really, really good in the offseason, start of LSPL, kind of like QG, kind of like Snake. They were doing really well in off-season tournaments leading up to the tournament, leading up to the LPL. They were beating LPL teams outside of the LPL, but they got into the LPL and they lost a lot of the things that made them look really, really strong. And this primarily was their proactive early game playmaking. In particular, Mlxg, who had been really, really aggressive in the past in the offseason and in the LSPL, was suddenly really lukewarm, and the team just tried to farm out and they got overwhelmed and pretty crushed in most games. This continued throughout most of the LPL until probably week 10 of LPL Summer, which was when they sort of seemed to click and turn back on. I don't really attribute this to the return of Vaikal. Vaikal was the coach, the Korean coach of Starhorn Royal Club when they went to the World Championship in 2014. He returned to the team at that point. King, that team, hello and welcome to the LPL brief again. This is currently week 3, day 2 just ended. I have so far talked about Edward Gaming, LGD Gaming, and QG Reapers. So I'm going to talk today about Royal Never Give Up. So the first question I get from people who watch Royal Never Give Up is, who are these Chinese players? Because on a lot of these teams so far, we've seen QG, we've seen Edward Gaming, we've seen LGD, we